I'm Pam. I'm Pam. Hi. Sex. Well, yes, sex. What do you say, really, you like a guy, you do it with him. Sometimes he calls, sometimes he doesn't. Woo!
The male erection, pitching a tent, sporting wood, bicycles formed, marches on.
Jonathan.
Stiffy, Mr. Mortis. Rigor mortis is set in. Flesh rocket, Jack's Magic Beanstalk, Tall Tommy, Mushroom on a Stick, Mr. Mushroom Head, Purple-Headed Yogurt Slinger, and, Pedro.
Pedro?
Because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise? Okay, everybody take some rubbers.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, today we will be continuing our discussion on human sexuality. And as we discussed, the official school policy is abstinence.
Now that is very sensible. I'm glad that someone here has their head screwed on straight. I think all of us should make a pact to abstain from sex. Now, who's with me, you guys? Come on. Maggie?
However, let's get real. I know asking high school seniors to be abstinent is like asking a porcupine to poop goat cheese. Yuck. So, since the majority of you are or will become sexually active at some point...
But that point should be way, way in the future, right?
Well, the official school position is that we prepare you for safe sex now. So please take one and pass it down.
I have needs. You don't need these?
Stan, give one to Mark.
No, you know what? He's right. I don't need one. You know why? You know why I don't need one? Because there's no one that I'm in love with. It's called making love, isn't it? Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think that means that you do it with someone you love.
It's hard. Difficult. But safe sex is really important. Okay, so just imagine that the bananas are the real thing. In a land called every man's fantasy.
God, I can't do this. Maybe that's because we're not supposed to be having sex with bananas.
Okay.
For the most part, I think we can all agree that those clips were pretty bad examples of sex education in schools. Sex education can be very beneficial to adolescents, and it can help them to be growthful. Since I'm assuming we all know about how sex education helps to prevent unplanned pregnancy and to prevent the spreading of sexually transmitted infections, I thought I would share with you some different ways sex education can be growthful to adolescents. Some of these things are already implemented in schools, and others are just in the beginning stages, but they're pretty well on their way. When we think of sex education, we usually think of adults doing all the talking, aside from the one brave kid who actually raises their hand to answer a question. In the clips, it was always adults teaching the class. It was never students teaching. Studies actually show that both teacher-led and peer-led sex education is beneficial. They should both be used in combination together. Peer-led education is better at creating conservative norms and attitudes towards sex, and adult-led education, it does a better job at giving actual factual information and at getting students involved in the class. So we know why it's beneficial, but what exactly is peer-led sex education? It's when older students come in and talk about their experiences and give insight about making informed choices. The way that's most commonly used of this is by having young moms come in and give presentations. Even if no new information is presented at all, the "it could happen to me" factor and the emotional connectedness lets students really grasp onto a deep understanding of the consequences that they could potentially face, and that tends to be very effective. An area that is still needing a lot of development and to be used more is making LGBTQ sex education inclusive to the learning instead of an exclusive side note that just gets thrown in at the end. Once a solid way of doing this is adapted by the majority of the sex education programs, I really think this will help all adolescents be growthful, not just those that are LGBTQ, but everyone in general, just to have a broader spectrum and to be more understanding of all of their peers. Programs now are mostly just informational, and then the teacher tells you to make good choices, and that's pretty much the end of it. In order to be a more growthful experience, though, teaching the skills that deal with assertiveness, communication, and empowerment, all of those skills need to be being taught. One thing that goes along with this is the level of explicitness of the lesson. The number one complaint from students about the material of sex education programs is that it's not explicit enough. And what this really means is they aren't learning enough. They don't feel like they've gotten enough explicit information. This kind of leads into the next topic that we'll discuss too. I didn't have the opportunity to read a lot about this, and mostly that's because there wasn't a lot of literature I came across about it. What I did read, though, it said public health in countries were teaching about the pleasure of sex and explaining that some of the pleasure can be experienced alone, resulted in better public sexual health. It can also make adolescents more comfortable with their own bodies and make it easier to communicate their wishes to others. The second part of what I just said is really the most important part, because part of that could include being less pressured into unwanted sexual relationships.